guys, the question is for Church A.
Everybody be quiet, please.
For the Book of Saint Mary in the Orthodox Council, question for Church A. Explain in detail the heresy of Manichaeism. For Church B. Explain in detail the heresy of Gnosticism.
Okay, Manichaeism was started by Manny Macinus or McCann, and it was pretty much the primeval conflict between light and darkness, and it was the fight against light and darkness, and pretty much that the common belief was that that we had believed in. Pretty much Satan had come and then he stole these particles of light, and these particles of light, or these like sparks of knowledge, came from God, and that he actually imprisoned it in man's brain. And after he imprisoned it in man's brain, our purpose, Buddha, the prophets, Jesus, and many were the ones that were to help us and liberate us from these particles of light, and help us in order to, I guess, liberate us from and take the particles out of our mind. Also, they believe that we shouldn't eat meat and to also aggregate from sexual relations, and that's how we would slowly achieve the liberation. To continue on, they didn't believe, obviously, that Saint Mary was the mother of God, because if Jesus was God, then she could not be his mother. They continue on in saying, obviously, the fathers defended against this. The fathers were Saint Alexander, Saint Athanasius, and Saint Ambrose. And Saint Athanasius had actually said that, that Saint Athanasius had said that Jesus' body was real, for he was of the same flesh, for Mary's our sister. And Saint Ambrose continued on and said, Mary gave what was of her own that she transmitted. She did not give something foreign of her, for her flesh was her own. And he continued on and said that she gave of her own flesh, although in an unusual way, it was of her foundation. And for Saint Mary gave of her own flesh to the fruit, which was Christ. And essentially, to just recap, it's pretty much the particles of light that Satan had stolen and he had put and entrapped in man's mind. And the whole point of our lives is to try to liberate these particles and send them back to God, the divine being. Thank you.
Basically, Gnosticism had to do with they denied the virginity of Saint Mary, and that Jesus Christ did not come from her, therefore denying incarnation. This was a big heresy, and also Saint Athanasius and Saint Cyril defended it. It had to do that it was a big problem because the divinity of Christ, people were getting confused, and there was a difference between Jesus Christ the person and Jesus the human nature of him and his divine nature. Which all obviously comes back to Saint Mary, relating to her virginity and how her relation was to Jesus Christ.
Church B, from the book of What is Man? His Holiness makes the argument that the rationale of man is affected by various influences. A. Provide two ways of how ignorance occur or happen in man and what it leads into. Part B, from the book, provide and explaining an example of the most serious condition or kind of ignorance and its consequences. Church A. His Holiness makes the argument that the rationale of man is affected by various influences. Provide 3 ways of how doubt occur or happen in man from within him. Part B. From the book, provide and explain an example of the most serious condition kind of doubt.
There are 2 kinds of ignorance. Unknown ignorance and then deliberate ignorance. Unknown ignorance, you can go through life, for example, thinking that there isn't a God, or like you shouldn't live by any rules that God set, which can lead to a bad or wrong conscience, which can eventually lead to sin. The other one, deliberate ignorance, you know that there is a God that exists, but you choose to not believe in it. That can also lead to a bad conscience and also to sin. From the book, provide an example of the most serious condition of ignorance and its consequences. The Bible itself says that those who choose to believe that there isn't a God or don't know that there is a God are foolish, and that is really one of probably the most serious condition of ignorance that there can possibly be, because then you would have no meaning for life.
Okay, 3 ways of how doubt can occur in a man are, well, there's 3 types of doubt. Number 1 is doubt in God. Number 2, doubt in others. And the third one is doubt in oneself. Now, doubt in oneself basically makes a person think, I can't do this, I'm not capable of doing this, and therefore his self-esteem starts to lower, and he's incapable of doing things that he would normally be able to do. Doubt in other people is he starts to believe that there's no good in the people around him. Any action that comes from other people, he starts to think, oh, he's not doing it because he's a good person. There's another reason behind it. Oh, I don't know what it is. And he just starts to doubt everybody around him and doesn't trust anybody. The third one is doubting God. This is the most serious one. Basically, it starts out in the doubt that God will help me out. God is capable of doing all this. This leads to the fact that God is there. If God doesn't help me out, then there must be no God. And then that further leads into, if there is no God, then my religion is wrong. And that leads to lack of faith. And eventually death. Thank you.
The final score for Church A had 60 points. Church B had 17 points.
This is one of the people from Rhode Island Church that just competed against Bergen. How do you feel?
Well, it was a good spiritual competition. We learned a lot. Everybody's a winner here, so it doesn't really matter in the end. But it was a good, healthy competition, and we hope to come back next year.
We have another person from Rhode Island Church, Mary and St. Mina's in Rhode Island, and how do you feel?
Pretty good. We studied as hard as we could for as long as we could.
Did you feel that you benefited?
Absolutely. The book was incredible. It definitely strengthened my faith, and after doing this, I did this last year and did it again. I definitely feel like I'm ready to defend my faith if necessary.
Now we have Matthew from St. George St. Shenouda Church in Bergen. And how do you feel?
About
what just happened? You just won.
I mean, we're happy we won, but at the same time, we think we can do better. We're not really worried about the points as much as what we learned from it. yeah, we want to do better, obviously, but at the same time, we're happy with what we got.